Man took out a dagger, cut a long slit in the seal's belly. Right after that, he lifted his frozen right foot, stuck it into the wound. When his right foot regained feeling, the man tore off his underwear, ripped it into strips, soaked them in the melting seal fat, then wrapped them evenly around his foot to treat the frostbite. He had already been on the run in the Arctic for 3 whole months in temperatures below minus dozens of degrees. Thinking about his wife and daughter waiting at home, the man dared not delay. Afraid the Soviet troops would soon catch up and drag him back. To escape the search, the man headed north, following the desolate coastline. Here there was no difference between day and night, hardly a trace of people, not a single blade of grass grew, not even a black dot on the snow. The endless white and loneliness could drive a person insane at any moment, but no one knew how long later. The man stopped walking. He put the bullet from his left hand into his right. It turned out that every 10,000 steps he walked, he grabbed one bullet with his left hand to keep count. That was how he judged how far he had traveled, but the 8 bullets in his hand had already gone through 3 rounds. The man had walked 240,000 steps, yet the scene before his eyes was still exactly the same as when he started. He felt as if he were marching in place, never able to walk out of here. He no longer counted his steps with bullets, nor bothered to tell directions, because no matter how he looked, east, west, south, north was all the same light, so white it was hopeless. So the man immediately decided to just shove the compass in his pocket and lower his head to keep moving forward. But to his surprise, just as he was about to go mad, a miracle happened. Not far away on the snow, a tall little tree appeared. The man was so shocked he collapsed on the ground, but the fright quickly turned into joy. He stumbled forward in big strides, ran up to the tree, crying and laughing as he hugged the branches tightly in his arms, because a tree meant the forest was not far. Soon he would walk out of this white wasteland. After the joy, the man quickened his pace, and sure enough, before long, he saw a forest in the distance. But an even greater surprise was waiting. The moment the man entered the forest, the sky darkened. That meant he had walked out of the Arctic Circle. Day and night began to alternate normally. To restore his strength, the man decided to rest in the woods for the night. But as he slept soundly, just then, a terrifying scream suddenly rang out. He snapped his eyes open alertly, and saw 2 fierce strangers, standing right in front of him staring at him. The man was terrified. He instantly sprang up from the ground, clutched his pistol tightly, and looked around for an escape route. But after glancing around, he realized there was nowhere to hide. Just as the man was at a loss, the fat man on the left suddenly spoke German. It turned out they were gold diggers and hunters. They saw fire while hunting at night, so they came to check. They meant no harm, but words alone proved nothing. Seeing this, the fat man explained there would be a snowstorm tomorrow. Better to leave together than camp here. But the man still refused. The 2 hunters felt awkward, so they turned and left. Yet the next day, the man was devastated to find the hunters had not lied. A terrifying snowstorm swept across the entire forest. He found nowhere to hide, and could only push forward against the storm, but against merciless nature. No matter how strong his will was, it made no difference. He was blown around wildly. Just as he wanted to stop to catch his breath, a collapsing tree smashed him into the snow, and he passed out immediately. Luckily, the 2 hunters had not gone far. When the storm ended, the fat man pushed aside the branches, found the dying man, and smiled as he said, "Now you believe us, right?" So the man had to let down his guard and travel with them. In the blink of an eye, half a year passed, but the road home was still long. According to his rough map, he had traveled about 4,000 kilometers. But from here to home, there were still 10,000 kilometers left. But the man was not discouraged, because no matter how long the road, as long as he did not give up, one day he would reach the end. But though the road had an end, the darkness of human nature had none. One day their raft hit rapids on the river. The man in the thin one rowed desperately, trying to stay balanced, but the current grew stronger. The fat man lost his grip, and was thrown into the rushing river. He hit his head on a rock and passed out. The man jumped into the water without hesitation, risking his life. He swam hard to the fat man, and dragged him to the surface. But just as they were gasping for breath, the thin one showed no sign of helping. Instead, he rowed away alone on the raft. Without a raft, the man could only follow the fat man on foot, walking cautiously through the woods. He could not believe it. A friend who had lived with them for half a year could be so cold and heartless. But the fat man was not surprised. He casually explained, the thin one had not found gold this trip, and did not want to go back, so he abandoned them on the shore, and slipped away on his own. As they talked while walking, they soon found a hunter's cabin by the river. Unexpectedly, the thin one was also there. Seeing their angry faces, he was not embarrassed at all. Instead, he came up with a grin. The fat man was angry, but since the thin one was his good friend, and he justified himself confidently, saying he left early to protect the luggage, there was no fight. Seeing the fat man let it go, the man said nothing, and only gave the thin one a fierce glare. But things were not so simple. The next morning, the man stepped outside, and immediately saw the thin one lying on the ground, already dead with no breath, while the fat man calmly butchered venison nearby.
Warum hast du ihn umgebracht? Warum wohl?
Hearing that, the man gave the fat man a deep look, feeling a chill on his back, but other than continuing with the fat man, he had no better choice, so he forced himself to calm down, picked up his bag, and set off on the road home again. Another year passed in a flash, as ice and snow swept the land. The man's friendship with the fat man also ended. The fat man panted heavily, saying he could not carry the luggage. The man kindly offered to help, but the suspicious fat man misunderstood, thinking he wanted to steal the gold. So the fat man suddenly turned violent, and knocked the man down the slope, shattering his last hope in human nature. No one knew how long later, the man woke from his coma, but as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw a pack of starving wolves, charging straight at him. The situation was urgent. The man had no time to draw his gun. He instinctively climbed a tree. The hungry wolves tore at his pants madly below. The thin tree trunk could not withstand such tearing. Soon it snapped in half. Just as the man was about to be torn apart, a burst of gunfire suddenly rang out. When he opened his eyes again, the wolves were gone. The ups and downs were too much to bear. The man had no strength to feel happy. His eyes rolled back, and he passed out again. But this time luck was with him. He was not found by ruthless hunters, but rescued by kind Tungu's people. Under the careful care of the chief's family, he soon recovered, and lived peacefully for a few days. But just as he finally breathed easier, the Soviet officer who had been hunting him, learned his whereabouts from an informant, and broadcast a wanted order in every town nearby. Hearing the news, the man felt helpless. He did not want to drag down his saviors, so he said he would leave at dawn. Before he left, the chief gave him a smart brave dog as a companion, and arranged a sled to take him far away. With the dog's company, the journey ahead was much smoother. Time flew by. Another year passed. The man crossed the vast wastelands, and reached a logging area near a city. But the real test was just beginning. The man secretly climbed onto a lumber train. He thought doing so would avoid the main road and the soldiers, and save time going home. But the officer had already prepared for this. He stationed men at every remote stop. When the man woke up, he saw Soviet soldiers right in front of him. He had no time to think, jumped off the train immediately, grabbed his dog and ran. But after a short distance, he ran into the smug officer. The man was cornered, and could only stand still to surrender. But the dog sensed his master's danger, and bravely leaped out, knocking the officer down. The man was torn and anxious, but he had no time to hesitate. He left the dog behind, and escaped before the soldiers arrived. But just a few steps later, he heard gunshots behind him. The dog was killed on the spot. The man was heartbroken, but he had no time to grieve. If he was caught, the dog's sacrifice would be wasted. With no time to tend his wounds, the man climbed onto a railway bridge, ran across the tracks, and leaped onto the roof of a passing train, barely escaping. But he felt no joy. The dog was dead, and his planned route was ruined. He could not understand why he was hunted. He had not committed any crime, had not even carried a gun during the war. Why did the officer have to chase him? But whether he understood or not, he had no choice. At dawn, the man chose a longer route, and kept moving forward. But frustratingly, after surviving the barren mountains, when he finally reached a populated city, he almost starved to death. The man had no money, and nowhere to hunt. Merchants saw he was German, and treated him badly. No one would give him food. Just as the man was desperate, confessing in a church waiting to die, a strange Jewish man appeared. He not only took him home to recover, but even promised to get him a passport, so he could pass the border safely. The man was stunned. He never dreamed, after being rejected everywhere, he would be saved by a Jew once persecuted by Germans. He could not help but ask,
Warum tun Sie das für mich?
Sie meinen, warum ein Jude einen Deutschen hilft, obwohl ihr Deutsche meine Brüder ermordet habt?
Soon, with the Jews' help, the man got a fake passport, and passed the checkpoint successfully. Looking at the border bridge ahead, he could not hold back his joy. Once he crossed the bridge, he would never have to fear the officer again. He could buy a ticket home, but just as he stepped onto the bridge, he stopped smiling. The officer was already waiting there. There were guards on both ends, and the middle was a bridge dozens of meters high. No matter how lucky or brave, he could not escape alive. The man clenched his fists, as if ready to resist, but the officer's mocking eyes shattered his will completely. After a standoff, the man sighed, lowered his head silently, thinking making it this far was enough for his family. Being caught was worth it, but just as he was ready to give up, the officer stepped aside, and moved to let him pass. The man was stunned. He tested a step forward, but the officer did not even look at him. Instead, he muttered to himself.
Ich hab dich besiegt.
Hearing that, the man was struck like lightning. He finally understood why the officer hunted him. This cat and mouse game was just like the war that had ended. There was no right or wrong. Everyone was forced into it. After the officer left, the man stood frozen for a long time, before he finally moved forward again. In the days that followed, he braved the wind and weather, day and night on the road, and finally on Christmas Day, he returned to his hometown, reunited with his wife and daughter he longed for. At last, the man's 3-year, 14,000 kilometers journey home finally came to an end.